Can everyone see this?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, Xiara, I think we're good.
Okay, no problem. Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Xiara Day, and today we'll be discussing some of the mapping results that we have occurred from the Sampling the City events that happened this month in the month of June. This presentation is provided by the Plume Air Monitors, which was also provided by Air Alliance Houston. And so the presenters for today, again, my name is Xiara Day. I'm the Clean Air Fellow for Air Alliance Houston. I will be the first presenter, followed by David MacLean, who will then present on some of the results that we found from the Plume Air Monitors. And just a little bit of information about David. He has worked pro bono for us for Air Alliance Houston by providing us with these personal air monitors. And so he'll be talking a little bit later about the data that we found, as well as a few more information. And so just a little bit of information about Air Alliance Houston. Of course, we are a research-based advocacy organization where we advocate for policies to help reduce air pollution, because we do believe that no matter where you live, work, learn, or play, it should not determine your health. And so we do envision healthy communities with clean air every day for everyone. So again, no matter where you live, where you work, where you play, no matter your religion, your social status, or even your income, everyone deserves to breathe in clean air. And so we do hope to carry out this mission through our mission of reducing public health impacts from air pollution through a variety of different entities, such as applied research, education, and advocacy. And so a few learning objectives that we hope that you all will gain from this presentation. Of course, we're going to discuss the various communities that were involved in the Sampling the City events that were again held in the month of June. We also want you all to become very familiar with personal air quality data tools, including the Plume monitors, which help you to see the invisible. And we also want to acclimate everyone to knowing what air quality index, otherwise known as AQI, and the toxic release inventory map, as those are very important air quality data tools that are available to the public. Following that, we also, of course, want to give a summary of the results that were provided by the Plume personal air monitors, and this will be provided by David. And then lastly, we want to conclude by sharing the next steps of how we want to continue conducting community advocacy for all of the communities that have been affected by air pollution here in the Houston region. Sorry, the screen froze or something. Okay, here we go. And so here's an example of the communities that participated in the Sampling the City events. This includes the historic Sunnyside, OST South Union, and the Fifth Ward community. And just to give you a visualization of where these communities are located here in the Houston region, of course, we have Fifth Ward, which is just northeast above downtown Houston. We also have OST in South Union, as well as Sunnyside, which are located near Loop 610 South, and they're located east of 288. And so again, this is just a visual just to show you where all of the communities are located. And so starting off with the Sunnyside event, they kicked us off with our Sampling the City June events. This occurred on the weekend of June 5th. And for Sunnyside, we conducted a 1 mile walk, a 3 mile bike ride, as well as a 6 mile bike ride. As you can see from the picture, we've had a great number of attendants, as well as a few important politicians, such as Commissioner Rodney Ellis, who is an avid biker, who was able to attend our event and advocate for our community. And so following Sunnyside, the following weekend on June 12th, we then had OST in the South Union community, also had a significant great turnout for them, which included a 4 mile bike ride as well as a 2 mile walk. And then lastly, concluding our June Sampling the City events, we ended with Fifth Ward community, who had a very interesting event on the Juneteenth, where they provided stories around the community, as well as their bike ride actually consisted of being done at night. And so this consisted of a 2.5 mile bike ride, as well as an 8 mile walk. An 8 mile bike ride as well. And so why these events are important for our community, of course, as we all know, air pollution is a very important, critical aspect of our health, as it does have many connections to causing serious health impacts among us. And of course, air pollution here in the Houston region can come from different entities such as car emissions, chemical plants or industrial facilities, ground level ozone, and just things of that nature. And so with air pollution occurring in our own backyard, as well as around the world, it's important that we conduct events such as this so that we can continue to advocate for the community, as well as raise awareness of air pollution issues. Along with that, another goal of us of producing this event, we also wanted to generate more localized data around air quality in the Houston region so that these communities are aware of what air toxics are happening or being produced within their communities, so that we can begin to form action plans or steps to ensuring that we are reducing these public health impacts. And so another goal of us producing these community events, we also wanted to bring awareness and tell people about different air quality tools that can be utilized that is free to the public, such as, of course, the plume air monitors, as well as the air quality index tool, otherwise known as the AQI, as well as the toxic release inventory map. And so looking at the air quality index tool, which the screen has frozen again, my apologies. Okay, here we go. And so looking at the air quality index tool, which is again an air quality data tool that is free to the public, the air quality index tool is an index that basically reports your daily air quality in your own backyard. And so it tells you either how clean or how unhealthy your air is within your community, as well as the associated health effects. And so the AQI values can range from as low as 0 to as high as over 301. And so if you had an AQI of say 50, this will indicate that the air quality is satisfactory and that air pollution poses little or no risk, meaning that the level of concern is good. But if you have an AQI of say 125, this will indicate that members of sensitive groups, which does include people who have respiratory issues or who are affected by asthma, they may experience some health effects, but the general public is less likely to be affected. And so it should be noted that the higher the AQI value, the higher the level of concern of air pollution, as well as the health effects that are associated with that level. And so along with the AQI, there's also the toxic release inventory map that we want to introduce you all to. And later on this presentation, I will present a link so that you all can access this on your own and view these TRIs for your own community. And so here's a TRI map of Sunnyside. Again, the TRI is a toxic release inventory, and essentially it tracks the management of certain toxic chemicals that may pose as a threat to human health and the environment. And so there are certain industries or facilities, if they produce certain chemicals such as benzene, they are required to report these emissions, how they produce these chemicals, as well as waste management practices. They're required to report these findings to the EPA, which they then post on this website so that it can be available to the public. And so within Sunnyside, you all don't exactly have any TRI facilities in your vicinity, but if you look in the upper left corner, you can see the green dots, which indicates a TRI facility. And there's about 6 green dots in the upper left corner, which does show that even during events where there are high winds, it can potentially transport any chemicals that they're producing into your nearby community. And next, looking at the OST in South Union community. As soon as this catches up, my apologies again. Here's a map of the OST in South Union community, and you guys actually do have a TRI facility right in the middle of your community, and that is the Industrial Metal Finishing Company. And so again, once you receive the link to this, once I provide the link to this TRI map, it will show you a plethora of information about the facility, who you can contact as the public contact for the facility, as well as different chemicals that they produce or emit and the associated health effects. And then lastly, looking at the Fifth Ward community, you all do have a couple TRI facilities within your vicinity, which does include the Nat Poly Pick Inc., as well as the ITEQ Storage Systems or the Modern Welding Company of Texas Inc. And so again, this is a very helpful resource that you all can utilize to know what toxins are being produced within, again, your own backyard. And now I will turn it over to David, who will now provide you information about the plume air monitors, as well as the data that we found.
Okay, thank you, Xiara. So first off, I am privileged to be able to have been included in these three events. The opportunity to connect with the inhabitants in these communities directly is why we started the Air Champion Social Change Scientists. McMac CX was formed to accelerate the implementation of sustainable best practices and provide performance outcome auditing in facility management firms of municipalities, architecture firms, so that those creators are building communities that are safe, healthy, efficient, and prosperous for everybody. Next slide, please. So environmental justice, you hear a lot about that these days. The reality of it is that most injustice when it comes to the environment is also a racial injustice, and that is no different anywhere else than it is here in Houston. The communities that were included in these 3 weekend analyses are all underserved in a lot of ways, except for the burden they have to carry with respect to pollution. Next slide, please. So what did we do on this exercise? So McMac CX is partnered with a number of global entities to bring data to life, to put data in context so that communities, the inhabitants, the influencers in those communities, and the creators of those communities can use that data in a manner that justifies doing better. So what did we do on this exercise? Next slide, please. So our plume partner out of Paris, France, makes the Flow personal air monitor. You can see it here hanging off the backpack. And this monitor collects data that then can be visualized and used to change social behaviors. Next slide, please. Here is a close-up picture of the Flow 2, which is the latest version and will soon be the only version, and Flow 1s are all sold out. But the Flow connects through Bluetooth to your app. The app allows you to see exactly what the air quality is and map it out on your smartphone. You can compare one day to the next to see how your journeys compare, and you can also look at community maps that are happening instantaneously of the air in your neighborhood. Next slide, please. So how does the Flow work? The air enters the Flow. Here's a picture on the back. The particulate matter sensor lights up. Next slide. The nitrogen dioxide, that's NO2, and the volatile organic compound sensor does its thing, basically draws air in. And it does this once every 60 seconds. So every 60 seconds is taking a breath, bringing the air in and analyzing it. Then all sensors are calibrated. The neural networks are activated within the Flow. Patterns are converted into measures. Flow applies filtering for a good measure just to make sure the data is clean. The filtered measures are turned into an AQI that Xiara spoke about, the air quality index. The air quality index receives the visual treatment on the screen, which is that what we saw on the smartphone, and the data is synced to the cloud. So the data goes from your Flow to your smartphone where it's visualized, and then it's stored on the cloud in our servers. Next slide, please. So here's an up close of the app. On the left-hand side, you can see the journey that you took during the course of that day. We provide color visualization, as Xiara explained in how the AQI is visualized. So you can see where you go, what that impact is. Down below, you can see that in graphical form. Next slide. You can then compare how that journey compared to the day before. Next slide. And you can also access a street view. And we're pulling this information not from the flow. This information we pull from 107 cities around the world. And this data is about 30 minutes old, where the data in the flow is 1 minute old. Next slide, please. So let's take a look at what we were able to see during these 3 events. I'm not going to go through every single flow that was out there taking data. I'm going to just show how we visualized what's happened. If you can see, this is Sunnyside. This was the walk that I was on. So it shows you visually our start up into the top right, and then we went down and went around the library and came back. This is showing the AQI. Down at the bottom, you can see the scale from the left, light blue being good, all the way over to the right being not good. And then you can see the graphical representation of that walk in timestamp. Next slide, please.
One moment, there's a bit of a lag.
That's all right, I understand. No, there we go. There we go, great. So when we look at the specific pollutant that we're able to see, we zoned in on particulate matter 2.5, which is 2.5 microns in size, which is small enough to be able to get into your lungs and then pass through into your bloodstream and be deposited in organs. So this is the most communicated or watched size for particulate matter. We can say that during the walk, we saw 2 times during that walk that the air quality was less than optimal. So it was above yellow. So it was a period of concern. Next slide, please. Here's the first bike ride. Just shows the route that we took, different color representation of the quality. You can see the graph down there for detailed graphical representation. Next slide, please. And we were able to see that PM10 was raised on the top right side. Next slide, please. Here's the bike ride number 2. Again, it maps exactly where we went with the color representation for the air quality at the time. Next slide. And down at the bottom here, along this portion of the route, the particulate matter 10, which is bigger in size than 2.5, was raised. Next slide, please. So we've moved on to Old Spanish Trail. This U-shape, we start the journey on the right, and we walked down Scott Street and back. It had short periods of raised air quality. We can dig deeper if we dive into the graphs. Next slide, please. We can see at this point along our journey that nitrogen dioxide was rising, which makes sense since that is the primary pollutant of concern from the combustion of automobiles. So that makes sense. Next slide, please. Here is the bike ride at Old Spanish Trail. There are a number of times that PM10 were elevated into the concern range. Next slide. Over into Fifth Ward. Fifth Ward was kind of interesting, and this is just one of the sensors. We have to look at all the sensors to get a really good picture. This whole route, this bike route, went around the train yard. So the Union Pacific, I get the Eaglewood yard is in the center of this thing, and the wind was blowing in a particular direction. Next slide, please. You can see on the south side, the air quality for nitrogen dioxide, which makes sense with the engines there idling, is higher than on the next slide, please, on the north side because of the prevailing winds. Next slide, please. So what do we do with this, right? Data without context is just noise. And there's enough noise out there. We want impact. So if we're looking at what's happening in our neighborhood, we want to make sure that everybody's engaged. We want to empower people. Everybody knows that good air is good for you and bad air is bad for you. What people don't realize is that we will never have great air in Houston. We'll never have great air in outside. We're never going to have great air inside. And that's, sorry that I have to say this, but the creators of our communities, the creators of our buildings are not required to design for great air. They actually are only required to design for acceptable air. And the sad part is they are never actually measured for their outcome. No building, school, hospital ever built in Texas or being built in Texas requires anybody to measure the air quality inside of those buildings or outside of those buildings. And so not only are they not required to measure it, they're not required to tell you whether it's good or bad, which in most cases, they don't know even if they are measuring it. So we want to be able to empower people to make the invisible visible with this is just on these 3 weekends, was just one way to do that with personal air monitors. There are other ways that McMac CX and Air Alliance Houston does this. And we do this by finding people with interest and skills and passions. And that was super evident in all 3 events. Everybody wanted to figure out how to make the places we live, learn, work, and play safe, healthy, and prosperous for everybody. So we do that by connecting people with shared interests. We connect those to the local assets, and there are many that we can take advantage of. We support people to take action, and we make connections across neighborhoods. So that is the plan moving forward. These 3 short events are really just the beginning. And you need to know that this is a first of its kind in the world. So no other community or groups of communities have ever come together to use data in a manner like this to be able to start a conversation and create a call to action, because that's really what the outcome of this is. So to let you know that this is going to continue as we move forward with similar events like this in the future, but McMac CX and Air Alliance Houston will continue to work with these neighborhoods. One of the ways that we'll do that is through the purchase of more of these flow personal pollution monitors. Another way that we do this, next slide please, is through our Plume app, the Plume air quality app. It is free. You do not have to have a flow to connect to it. And this gives you live air quality reports. It forecasts what the air quality is going to be in the next 2 to 3 to 4 days. We can look out from historical data. You can take a look back and see what happened. You can compare cities, because we're pulling all available data from over 107 cities around the world, and we can create street level maps. Next slide, please. Such as this, one of which I showed earlier. This allows you to see exactly where the hotspots are for different contaminants in different cities, and you can zoom in to where your neighborhood is and see what's happening. Next slide, please. We're also, right now, I have put an indoor air quality monitor, a stationary monitor sitting on the wall of the Sunnyside Community Center. So it's going to be there for the next 2 months. And we're collecting indoor air quality. You see on the right, temperature, humidity, carbon dioxide, total volatile organic compounds, and particulate matter 2.5. The real-time access to this is accessible for anybody, is at the website down at the bottom of this slide. all of the things that we just talked about are creating transparency into what's happening in our neighborhoods. Without transparency, we can't have accountability. Those are the functions that we are trying to tie together in the neighborhoods. And that is it for my portion of this presentation. Thank you very much. I really want to thank Air Alliance Houston for organizing this, but mostly I want to thank everybody for coming out and being passionate about making their communities better. And we will, at McMac CX, continue to be engaged as much as we can. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Okay, so now looking at what's next. So Air Alliance Houston, we will work with each specific community to do a variety of different things. First, we want to work with you all to pick a date and a time frame that works best for your community members this summer to learn more detailed information about specific sources of air pollution in each neighborhood. And so for this time frame, this can happen as early as next month, such as July, or even into August. Additionally, we will work with these community members to help prioritize air quality concerns and identify specific action steps for each community. And so within the next week, Air Alliance Houston will reach out to the community liaisons who we've worked with directly for these events. We will reach out to each of you to ensure that we can formulate a specific time and date or some type of time frame so that we can begin working on these action steps and developing a plan to know what specific sources are producing these toxic air pollutants within your community. And so once again, Air Alliance Houston, we would love to thank everyone for coming out and supporting and for also participating. We've had a great turnout for each event, for each Sample the City event in the month of June, and we're looking forward to the next ones, hopefully happening either in the fall of 2021 or possibly in the spring of 2022. And so again, we advocate that everyone please continue to advocate for your communities, use your voice for the voiceless, and we all must help each other to ensure that we are all breathing in healthy, clean air. And so without any further ado, if there are any questions for David, Jennifer, or I, please let us know.
David, it might be worthwhile to let the communities know the difference between the air quality index that we're getting from the EPA or Texas air quality TCEQ versus the air quality index that we get from Plume Lab.
Okay, I was hoping that no one would ask that. So thank you.
I'm sorry.
Well, see, here's the deal, right? So air quality indexes are like belly buttons. Everybody's got one and they're a little bit different. And the air quality index that the Plume Labs uses is the World Health Organization Air Quality Index. So it is color coded and weighted a little bit differently than the EPA's, then so there's a number of them. Here's really what you need to know about an air quality index. It is trying to show you in numerical and color representation of how far you are off from being good. If that's all you remember, if you just think of an AQI, is that green, typically green or blue is in all of them is good. And anything that goes towards the red spectrum is bad, right? Now, that's about where they all stop in common, because some AQIs are you're good if you're 100 and you're horrible if you're 0, and some is the other way around. So now that I've confused everybody, I would just back up and reiterate that AQIs are important. We continue to work with organizations around the world to come to some standard, right? We want some common language to be able to speak. We're not there yet, right? We're still crawling through all of this to create the right messaging and voices that everybody can internalize the importance without having to become an air quality expert.
Thank you, David.
I had a question. This is Carolyn. My question is, you had talked about using the app to monitor on the phone, to monitor the air quality. What's the difference in that than the monitor that you carry? And does it operate basically the same?
So the Flow app, which is the app that connects with the Flow monitor, it is showing the data being collected by that personal air monitor. So it's collecting that data only. The Plume Labs app, which is also made by Plume Labs, it is designed to show you the data from stationary air monitors that are sitting out on a pole in different communities at different intervals around the world. So there are air monitors that are readily, the data is readily available and open to the public. We capture that data and then we visualize that on a map. And then we use previous air quality data and weather data to be able to predict what's going to happen out in the future. The Flow app, the Flow that you carry, will not predict what's going to happen out into the future because it doesn't know where you're going to go, and it's measuring the bubble around you. So does that answer your question?
Sir, one other question, if you don't mind, is that can we go to Plume Lab or Air Alliance and see this information that you've given us in writing as far as monitoring the air in our community?
Yes, so the Plume Lab app with Street View is a free app that you don't need to have the Flow monitor to access. So that's readily available. You can look at it through the Plume Lab website, or you can just download the app on your phone and you can search any of the cities and you can, figure out what you want to do with that information. We use this information, or AccuWeather uses this information on its website. It's the same data to predict what's going to happen, not just with the weather, but also what's going to happen with air quality index in the next 3 to 5 days. So that's readily available to you.
Question, Paulette Wagner. This information, I'm assuming, is frozen in time. So was some kind of report going to be developed for each of these communities that they could use as a springboard in monitoring the air in their community? Excuse me.
Yes, that is correct. So we will work on individual, I'll call them case studies. It's not probably the right verbiage, but with Air Alliance Houston and McMac CX and our Plume Lab partners, we will develop some sort of, I'll call it a case study that will capture what happened on that day, and more importantly, how we move forward to develop a call to action.
Thank you.
You're welcome, Paula.
Carolyn, were you finished?
Thank you, Betty. Yes, I am. I just wanted to tell David thank you, and his last explanation was clear. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kelly.
Okay, thank you. David, are you going to be on the call tonight?
I am, yes.
Okay, well, thank you. This is Betty Gregory. I missed part of the call this afternoon, and so I'm gonna jump back on. But even if I had heard the full call, I'm still a little disappointed. Well, not disappointed at all. I'm fascinated, but I'm still a little in the dark about the monitoring process. So I think it'll do me good to listen again this evening. And now I'm feeling a little sad that I gave away my phone. gave away my monitor because I probably would have learned something if I had kept my monitor.
You
But
gave it for a good cause, Miss Betty. You gave it up for me to put on it back to right. Okay.
okay, I believe you, Sandra. So I'm gonna listen again tonight. And
Okay.
thank you guys for some good information here.
And I just wanted to ask Withel, if you could come on for a minute, could you share a little bit about OST and what you've done and what you plan to do with those monitors that you've bought for your community? If you can unmute Withel, if you're still on, I see your name up. Well, maybe while she's trying to unmute there, I just wanted to share with folks that Air Alliance Houston has 15 monitors. And as Xiara said, they will be sharing them at other points with other communities in the future. But you can also purchase these. And I know that OST purchased 10 for their community. So while Air Alliance absolutely wants to help many communities do this, you can also do this independently as well. And the more monitors out there, obviously, the better. David, did you want to talk about that just a minute?
Well, I don't want to turn this into a sales pitch, but we are one of the few.
They can buy them.
Yeah, so you can buy the flow through our website. 100% of the profits go to scholarships for teachers and students. We have over 100 classrooms using the flow in a teaching capacity that all have been made possible by individuals buying flows through our site. So we need to sell about 12 flows to be able to give one away for free. But that being said, we also, if you're doing a bulk purchase like OST did, we have an agreement with Plume Labs to be able to give you a significant discount. So it's not our intent to make money off of this unless it's to actually give 100% of that away to scholarships for teachers and students to be able to learn about air quality. So just go to our website and it's there, and I can put that in the chat probably if I can figure out how to do that.
Okay, great. Does anyone have any other questions?
This is Carolyn again, full of questions. Yes, there was a statement that you made about the air quality all over Houston, that it's bad, like all over Houston. But do you agree that it's worse in certain parts of Houston than it is in other locations? Can you answer that question? Thank you, Dave.
Wow. Yeah, I am reluctant to step into that. If you can see, so Houston has never been able to meet its obligation to meet air quality standards. So it's always been a non-attainment city. So let's just take that as, when the EPA started measuring air quality, Houston has never been able to get out of the non-attainment category. So big statement, yes, air quality in Houston is bad, but air quality is transient, right? It is dependent on the winds that are blowing. It depends on who's releasing chemicals. It depends on whether there's a bunch of cars on the road. It depends on the weather, whether it's sunny, dry. So there's a lot of variables. I can't say for certain that the areas you live in are worse off than others without having the data. We're just starting to crawl to get the data. There's sensors that are permanently installed on sticks around the communities. Not enough of them, though, to actually give us the kind of data that we want. And we are actually prevented from doing that as a city the state actually prevented the city of Houston from putting in air quality monitors on their own to use in any kind of regulatory capacity. So we are having to buy outdoor air monitors, regulatory air monitors ourselves as communities. And that's just slow. And, you know, that's on purpose. So the air quality is not good in Houston. There are worse days than others. And what we want to be able to show you as the inhabitants have the right to be able to complain to both Harris County and the city of Houston that the air quality is bad. Technically, all you have to do is just say, I got itchy eyes and a smelly nose, and they have to respond. But guess what? If we have screenshots from flows and other types of data, it is much more credible and harder for them to basically just ignore us. So I know that's I sound like a politician kind of stepping around that issue, but without a lot of data, we can't make that overarching statement that OST is consistently worse than any other part of Houston, although people who live there probably feel that, and it may be right.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, well, thank you all very much for joining. We greatly appreciate it. If you have any feedback, feel free to email Xiara. Do you mind putting your email, your personal email there real quick for folks? Your work email, I mean. And anyone can contact Xiara and share any thoughts that you have, any questions that maybe we weren't able to answer this time, because as David said, no communities have ever done this together. This has never happened. I think David said in the world. So this is a really big first. And I think it's a great one. So please do reach out to Xiara, and thank you all so very much for joining us.
Thank you, everybody.